Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the HFS GCC Advantage series. My name is Achyuta Ghosh, and I am an executive research leader at HFS, where I lead our GCC research and advisory practice. GCCs today are growing faster than ever, right? More centers, more talent, bigger mandates. On the surface, everything looks strong. But if you look a little closer, there are real questions around how sustainable this model is. At the same time, AI is fundamentally changing the GCC model, how works get done, how value is delivered, what skills are in demand, how the pyramid changes, and what these centers are expected to do going forward. We are already seeing a shift, and what these centers are traditionally doing, traditionally shared services, scale-led models, they are shifting to far more outcome-driven and eventually to what HFS describes as being generative in nature. This is exactly what we are doing in this series, bringing in leaders and practitioners to talk about what needs to change, what's not being said enough, and what it will take to make the model truly future ready. In this episode, we focus on leadership. Are GCC leaders really ready for what is to come next? And to explore that, I am joined by Arindam Mukherjee, Managing Director and Global Head of Finance Controller Systems and Data Operations at Citi. Arindam has had a long and illustrious career in Wall Street, working for some of the largest global and most complex financial institutions in the world, and is an operator at heart and in practice. Welcome to HFS GCC Advantage, Arindam.
Achyuta, thank you. And it's a real pleasure to be joining the inaugural episode, as I believe it is, with you and the HFS. You guys have been doing a terrific work, and I think you're focusing on the right thing because while there is a tremendous amount of growth, leadership is at the core of everything. So I'm glad to be part of this exercise. I'm glad to be contributing.
So Arindam, you've spent decades building and leading GCCs, and you have also been on the corporate side, expecting outcomes from them. Can you briefly walk us through the journey and how it shapes the way you look at GCCs today?
Yeah, definitely. I have been in this space for a very long time, several decades, and I'll probably focus more on, where I had been in city for the last, about 18 plus years. I had spent time in city. And I have operated GCCs. I have built, I have scaled, transformed, and most importantly, ran or operated GCCs in pretty much every single domain that one can think of. Big enterprise functions like finance, risk, HR analytics, information security operations, talk about it. I mean, non-cyber part of it. Pretty much in every single GCC hotspot, I built centers in number of locations in India, Costa Rica, several locations in US, Philippines, obviously very large center, Malaysia, Poland, Hungary, so you name it, right? Ireland. Uh, but it's also what's interestingly what I had done, and I haven't found too many people as my compatriot. I wish there were many. Also had to exit in some of the locations, which I can guarantee you, and I will talk probably more about that in the other questions, is much harder than building. So all in all, I think spend a lot of time in this domain, always been an operator, always been transforming. And I'm seeing over the last, year and a half, how AI is dramatically reshaping this. And I'm very involved in the AI ecosystem. I'm advising several, growth stage AI product companies, B2B enterprise side. For the fun of it, I'm now a principal mentor in one of the leading tech accelerators in New York City. Again, advising a handful of fintechs in commodities trading side and healthcare. But again, in how do they perfect their go to market, their commercialization strategy. So yeah, a long experience, a lot of good lessons, a lot of failures. You learn more from that than sometimes from success.
Thank you, Arindam. That's a very unique vantage point, right? It gives you a much more, what do I say, grounded view of how this model actually works, and it has devolved over a period of time. If you look at GCCs today, Arindam, the numbers look incredibly strong, right? There are more than 2,000 GCCs in India itself, maybe 2x, 3x more of that globally. Right, 3,000 centers in India itself, right? More talent, bigger mandates, right? But this apparent size expansion, this apparent success, is it masking any deeper issues? What do you think is actually broken beneath the surface?
Yeah, I'll probably characterize that a little bit differently. And I wouldn't probably use the term broken because that has a negative connotation. What I would probably say, the scale had been enormous and breathtaking, to be honest. A little anecdote here, Achyuta, since we both love stories, right? When I built the finance center in Mumbai back in 2008, 9, along with at that time the head of FP&A, we came here and we were looking for, are there anybody doing anything sitting in India, sitting in Mumbai, not for the country. Obviously, a city had a very large India presence and continues to be one of the biggest, foreign bats in the country. And we had an office somewhere, back in the days, the Dusty Lane near the international airport, that old international airport. And we went there and we've been told that there are a handful of people who are supporting, the US business and UK business. And we were actually on a hunting trip trying to find who those people are. And, after like a half a days of search, I think we gathered, find a, somewhat 20 people who kind of crawled from different floors, and we all came to the conference room and they are like looking at each other for the first time, right? I mean, it is unbelievable. Like that's where we all started. And that team, over the next 4 or 5 years, grown into, between the function that I ran and what was ran under FP&A, grown into something like 1,500, people. So the scale had been breathtaking. It is fantastic. And then obviously every single corporation, talked about the number of the GCCs have grown here and got a great success. But I think we have gotten a little too used to the growth, right? We have almost started to take it as given. Like nothing is going to change this juggernaut, right? This path is forever and for perpetuity. I think that's where the risk is, right? The leadership has to evolve to tackle that there will be a cycle. There is a one type of leadership when you're growing, which is let's just get more people in a more manual process, move it over here, do it cheaply, do it well, not just cheaply, but do it well. But then that cannot be the source of sustenance for the next 10 years. We're already saying it. And then people are like struggling. Where do we go from here? That brings us to what role does leadership play?
That's a very interesting point you're bringing out, Arindam, because a lot of the conversation right now is focused on technology and AI, right? But you're saying that it's not really a AI problem, it's a leadership problem first. Um, what are the specific leadership mindsets or behaviors that are holding GCCs back right now, if I were to build up on the point that you just made?
Yeah, it's not a tech problem. Tech is a disruptor. Tech had always been a disruptor, right? It's just that the scale of disruption that we're seeing at this moment is again breathtaking, correct? I mean, every single day we got a new coding tool which is coming up, which is competing with the old one. We had cognition, I mean, just on the coding side, because there is such a large tech population in India supporting globally. Part of the GCC, I don't have the exact stat. You guys are better at it. Are probably well over 50 to 55% are in the domain of technology, right? I mean, I've seen some form of infrastructure, development, et cetera, et cetera. And they've all relied on writing codes of all shapes and sizes, and that whole code writing, if I just kind of narrow it a little bit on that, and I'll come to the leadership, how it plays into it, that whole code writing as a skill is under threat. You don't need to sit there and write codes because the machines are writing codes which are every single day is getting as good, if not better, than how human had been writing billions of lines of codes in the past, right? So, clearly just today, I mean, there is another company called Factory, which is, getting like $2 billion valuation led by Costa Ventures, and then Sequoia and everybody else is participating. And they're competing head on with, obviously the ubiquitous, the Cloud Code and, and Cursor and Cognition and others. So these are all coming, right, at a breathtaking speed. And if the leadership's view is that we have come to this point of leadership, which certainly has brought them, a lot of glory and a lot of economic mobility. Let's not ignore that fact. A lot of social mobility, which has all been good thing. But over a period of time, most of the leaders in GCCs that I've seen have just become leaders of people, managing an infrastructure of a very large, several thousand people under the organization. And they have taken that as their role. And so they will continue to grow in the organization. If there another 100 people gets added to the domain of influence, another 1,000 gets in, I kind of go up 2 more level. And over a period of time, how the work is getting done and how that work needs to change, the leadership at the top has kind of got to stand from there. And then AI is bringing us right back to how the work was done historically and how that's going to change, like dramatically. So if the leaders are distanced from that, they'll suddenly feel, kind of find themselves at a spot where their value has fallen, like, and will fall. So um, this is the core of it. So you cannot divorce yourself from a domain expertise. And I think a lot of middle managers, as I see, have kind of gotten distanced from the domain expertise, right? You have to be demanding excellence from your people, not demanding time. Like, and I have believed in it. People who have worked for me, they know that, yes, I have been a demanding leader, but I have not demanded their, loyalty. I didn't demand their time that you work, 20 hours a day. I demanded excellence because that will take them, not me, take them to the next level of their career. And people have proven me right, in doing so. So how do you demand excellence as a leader if yourself is not close to the process? So what the leaders will need to do is to make sure that they are getting closer to the process that are under their domain of influence. They are not just sitting there and being a manager of facilities. It's not a landlord role, right? A landlord role is gone, and you can't do a landlord role. Real estate can do that, okay? Um, so that's what I would say, that the leaders will have to get back to their, so that you need to understand the process, get over that obsession of I need 100 more people, 1,000 more people to prove that I have a point of impact in the organization. Your impact is not, or will not, more so defined by the number of people you manage. Your impact will be defined by what outcome you produce for the organization, right? That's the core change. And to do so, you have to know the process very well so that you can speak for your people. I always say the role of the leader in a GCC, because you're usually by design, 8,000, 6,000, 9,000 miles away from where a lot of the headquarter decision making is happening. The role of the GCC leader is to represent the thousands of people who are working thousands of miles away in a room where they are not there, but speak on their behalf with absolute fluency and conviction. And you can't do that if you don't know what they're doing and how you can improve their life by adopting the better technology or not trying to protect the empire, right? Take your youngest, population. You're the lowest level of the employees, the entry level fellows. Just take them out for a coffee. You got the fantastic cafeteria. Just grab a coffee with them. Tell them ask them what they're doing. Let them educate you. That's the only way that we can make that leadership.
Yeah, and I think love the analogy of how you said the landlord role is gone, right? Great that you're bringing the importance of domain. So if leadership is really the lever here for you, Arindam, then the next question obviously is what needs to change, right? If leaders get this right, what is needed to change in how they operate in an AI driven world? And how does a future ready GCC really look like as a result?
I think some of the core tenets of leadership will never change, right? Like you got to have empathy. You got to know your subject, which you think where some of the weaknesses are coming, but you got to have empathy. You got to have the communication skill. You got to have the influencing skill. You got to be able to, get into a room or the virtual room these days a lot more than the real room and be able to read the room, right? And understand where people are coming from. Like, what are your stakeholders' point of view? What's their agenda? And I'm not using the word agenda here negatively, agenda in a positive way. Like, what is that what they accomplish, and where would this GCC plug in to help them accomplish their goal? I heard long time back, from the CEO of a very large financial services company, and this gentleman described, his role as to make his colleagues successful. It stuck with me, always stuck with me. Not to make, company successful, not to make employees successful. People say, oh, all kinds of stuff, shareholders. Said, my role is to make my colleagues successful. So if the GCC leader thinks of my colleagues being the stakeholders at a corporate or different business segments or enterprise leaders or CFOs or CROs or CHROs or head of tech, my job is to make them successful. So to do that, I got this fairly large number of people behind me who can make it happen. How do I act as the bridge with conviction, empathy, and the knowledge? So I think that's where people will have to stick to it. A lot of it is just sticking to the basics. But the difference is, and it's this word has been cliche. Just in the last 2 days, I've been speaking in a conference, and then doing in a bunch of panels and workshops. So this term, like, you got to reimagine your process is being thrown around a lot. And then some people kind of started to roll their eyes when they hear it one more time. But I'll tell you, there is a real value in that reimagining your process. And you almost start by saying, everything that I do as a step, let's start with the assumption that some form of intelligence, artificial intelligence, can do that, right? If you start with that and you put that AI in the center of your thinking and now start looking at your process, and you only say it cannot do it once you have tested, kicked that tire really, really hard, then you have a much different appreciation of what your people do and where AI can come in. And then, as a GCC leader, you go to the organization and say, I believe we can put AI here. I know the process. I know that part of the process which is ready for AI. And I can also tell you with conviction the part of the process where we do not need to spend money on AI. There are other ways that we can make that process, modernize that process. As a GCC leader, you have to get to that level and speak to it, right? Which means you yourself will be demanding excellence, right, from yourself, right, as a leader. At the same time, you'll be carrying the whole army of people who are there in the GCCs, and you would not have such a large army. I think that's a fact that you all have to accept, right? And so then how do you make sure that you kind of pivot from thousands of people to, less number, less thousands of people, maybe hire hundreds of people, but you have your best people in the mix who can take the process to the next level. It's a lot of moving parts, but if you're always thinking in your head, for me to move to the next level, I need another 1,000 people under my belt, you're completely on the wrong track.
I think that's a great note to end this on, Arindam. How to make my colleagues successful. I think that's a great leadership mantra. Not only reimagining just the model, but the people behind it, the leadership behind it. Thank you for joining us and sharing your perspective on such an important topic. Personally, I believe leadership is often the biggest challenge, more than technology or the business model. After all, it's strong leadership that has really brought GCCs to where they are today, right? So we
Correct.
look forward to having you back with us in the future to see how your vision for the evolution of GCC is playing out. Have a great day. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Achyuta.